They came in the name of God, bearing crosses on their chests and steel in their hands. From the ports of Europe, fleets set sail toward the Holy Land, their hearts burning with faith, ambition, and vengeance. But what they didn't know was that in the heat of Egypt, a man waited, not with legions of men, not with monstrous walls or terrifying weapons, but with something far more dangerous: patience, calculation, and the mind of a master strategist. His name was Sultan Al-Kamil, and while kings and knights dreamed of glory, he was already moving the pieces on the board. The Crusaders thought they were leading the game, but they were being played. Every move they made, every battle they fought, every word they spoke, manipulated by a sultan who knew that the sharpest sword wasn't made of steel. It was made of silence, deception, and time. This is not a tale of battlefield glory. It is a story of psychological warfare, of political genius hidden beneath robes and diplomacy. While Western Europe saw him as just another Muslim ruler standing in the way of Christian destiny, Al-Kamil saw further. He saw the ambitions of kings and the pride of popes. He saw the weaknesses beneath their armor, and he exploited them like a master puppet master, smiling as they danced to his tune, never realizing the strings had already wrapped around their necks. In the early 13th century, the Fifth Crusade was launched with renewed fury. After previous failures and bloody stalemates, the Latin Church, now under Pope Innocent III and later Honorius III, believed it had finally found the formula for success: strike Egypt first. It was Egypt, after all, that served as the beating heart of Islamic power in the region. Take the Nile, and Jerusalem would fall like a leaf in the wind. That was the plan. But plans built on arrogance and underestimation rarely survive the test of reality. In 1218, thousands of Crusaders gathered in Damietta, a key port city along the Nile. Among them were Templars, Hospitallers, knights from Germany, France, and Italy, all burning with the belief that God was on their side. They laid siege to Damietta with feverish determination. But while they battled walls and rivers, Sultan Al-Kamil watched from within. His father, Al-Adil, had just died, leaving him the new Sultan of Egypt. Young, under pressure, and surrounded by enemies, most rulers would have panicked. Al-Kamil did not. He did something unexpected. He offered peace. He sent letters to the Crusaders offering Jerusalem in exchange for their withdrawal from Egypt. Yes, Jerusalem, the very prize they had longed for since the First Crusade. But the Crusaders rejected it. Why? Because they didn't believe him. Or worse, they thought they could take both. Pride poisoned their judgment, and Al-Kamil knew it. He withdrew his forces, appearing weak, hesitant, and indecisive. The Crusaders saw it as divine favor. In truth, they were falling into his trap. Winter came. The Nile flooded, as it always did, transforming the land around Damietta into a swamp of disease and death. The Crusaders, unfamiliar with the rhythm of the Egyptian landscape, began to suffer. Dysentery, starvation, and heat cut them down in the hundreds. Still, they pressed forward, finally capturing Damietta after a brutal siege that lasted nearly 18 months. They celebrated as if the war was won. Al-Kamil congratulated them. He retreated further south, again offering Jerusalem for peace. Again, they refused. The arrogance was astonishing. To the Crusaders, Al-Kamil was desperate. To Al-Kamil, they were predictable. And now that they held Damietta, he knew exactly how to bleed them. In 1221, the Crusaders, led now by Cardinal Pelagius, an inflexible and overconfident man, decided to march on Cairo. This was the final blow, they believed. They didn't realize the Nile would rise again. They didn't understand the terrain. And they certainly didn't know that Al-Kamil had opened certain floodgates upstream. The land swallowed them. The Crusaders found themselves stuck in rising waters, unable to retreat, their horses drowning, their soldiers panicking. Al-Kamil waited until the perfect moment, then struck. His army, well-fed and rested, descended upon the Crusaders like the wrath of the desert sun. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. The Crusaders begged for peace. This time, Al-Kamil accepted. He gave them their lives in exchange for Damietta. And just like that, the entire crusade collapsed. Years of preparation, thousands of lives, and rivers of gold. Lost. And yet, Jerusalem still stood, unconquered, untouched, because one man knew that sometimes the most powerful weapon is restraint. But the story doesn't end there. 7 years later, a new player entered the game. Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor, launched the Sixth Crusade. Unlike his predecessors, Frederick wasn't a typical crusading king. He was a philosopher, a linguist, a man of science and diplomacy. He spoke Arabic, understood Islamic customs, and, unlike the clergy who despised him, he didn't believe in fanatical bloodshed. And perhaps most importantly, he respected Al-Kamil. What followed was something that confounded the world. There was no major siege, no rivers of blood. Instead, in 1229, Al-Kamil and Frederick met, diplomatically, privately, without swords, and struck a deal. Al-Kamil gave Jerusalem to Frederick. Not through battle, but through treaty. For 10 years, the city would be under Christian control, while Muslims retained rights to their holy sites. It was a move that shocked both the Christian and Muslim worlds. Frederick entered Jerusalem unopposed. He crowned himself king in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, without a pope's blessing, without a single battle fought. Meanwhile, Al-Kamil gained peace, stability, and time to strengthen Egypt's defenses. But this so-called victory tore Christendom apart. The Pope excommunicated Frederick for negotiating with the enemy. The Church was humiliated. And Al-Kamil? He had once again won by outthinking his enemies. He handed them what they wanted, and in return, he fractured their unity. It is said that a wise ruler never shows all his strength at once. Al-Kamil understood this better than any man of his age. While kings were drunk on the illusion of divine destiny, he quietly shaped the fate of nations. He understood the Crusades were not just wars of swords, but of psychology, of perception, and of pride. And every time the Crusaders let their pride guide them, they played into his hands. Al-Kamil was not a warrior king in the traditional sense. He was a master of delay, of diplomacy, of controlling not just his own troops, but his enemies' expectations. He read them like open scrolls, watched them clash with each other, and when the time was right, offered them exactly what they desired, knowing full well that desire was their greatest weakness. He remains a rare figure in the annals of the Crusades, not because he conquered with might, but because he conquered with the mind. A Muslim ruler who understood Christians better than they understood themselves. A sultan who fought a holy war, not with bloodlust, but with chess-like brilliance. So the next time you hear tales of great Crusader victories, of sieges and battles that shook the Holy Land, remember this. There was once a sultan in Egypt who didn't need to win every war, because he never let his enemies realize they were already losing. And that is the most dangerous kind of victory.